Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up tonight. I really appreciate it, as do Lex and Jerrell. A big thanks, Jerrell, for participating in this conversation with resident artist Lex Marie. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. The first is that Lex's solo exhibition, Let Them Kids Be Kids, will be open until January 22nd, 2023. So mark your calendars. This is not something that we've publicized widely yet. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Likewise, our exhibition Assembly, Time and Attention, the National Biennial curated by Blair Murphy, will be open until January 29th. Another thing to note, and I'm going to put this in the chat now, is that we are actually hosting a really fantastic event in Baltimore that Jerrell has generously offered to participate in. We are going to do a series of studio visits with 4 artists based in Baltimore on November 19th, which is a Saturday. And I put the Eventbrite registration in the chat there so that you can take a look. Among the artists we're going to be visiting are, of course, Jerrell Gibbs and Amy Boone-McCreish, Alex Epstein, and Jackie Malad. A quick thanks to Savannah Imani Wade, Rhea Rowland, and Aiden Henry on their work on the presentation that we're going to be looking at shortly. So thank you all very much for all your work on that. Tonight, what I'm going to do is go ahead and read the bios for both Lex and Jerrell. I'll start with Lex, and we'll flick through a couple of images by both artists. And then I'm just going to go ahead and let Lex and Jerrell start up a conversation. This is meant to be an open-ended, organic conversation. There have been some prepared questions, but we're just going to kind of let Lex and Jerrell flow through their conversation. If you have questions or comments, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. I will intermittently bring those up if it feels appropriate. And we anticipate that Lex and Jerrell will talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A, and we should wrap up at around 7 o'clock. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and read the bios. Oh, and by the way, I did not give my title. Sorry about that. Amanda Hedon Murphy. I'm a curator, the resident artist and collector liaison at MoCA Arlington. All right, so we'll start with Lex. Lex Marie uses her life and personal history as her subject. Marie holds a BA in studio art with a concentration in painting from the University of Maryland, College Park. Marie's first solo exhibition, Remember, Remember, opened in 2 separate locations in Washington, D.C. through Arena Social Arts Club in 2021. Marie's work has been curated into group exhibitions, including Cumberland Valley Jury Exhibition in Washington County Museum of Fine Arts in Hagerstown this year, 2022, Future Places in the Susquehanna Art Museum in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in 2022, Rooted in Voyage, Band Devices, Los Angeles, 2022, We Can't Predict Tomorrow in what was formerly known as Arlington Art Center in 2021, and Fresh Start by McCall Art Advisory. She lives and works in the DC metropolitan area. Now, Jerrell Gibbs. I'm going to read a little bit about Jerrell's work overall as we look through these slides and then the bio. Jerrell Gibbs' work is usually sourced from albums he finds of Black American families in the 70s through the 90s that capture moments of intimacy, leisure, and elegance. Gibbs highlights the subtle adornments found in domestic and intimate spaces of these images, which represent cultural symbols in an era where Black folks created beauty with whatever means they had. Plastic on the sofas, wood solo cups, and floral wallpaper all indicate an interior that is familiar to his upbringing. He leans into a method of painting that supports the duality of Black people who may not have had the means, yet still play an active role in creating world-renowned culture and style that are both beautiful and classic. The closer a viewer is to his paintings, you witness imperfection in brushstroke and color, as well as artistic choice that seem misaligned. Farther away from the work, however, one can see the illusion of a cohesive image. Gibbs celebrates this dichotomy because it portrays chance as an integral to the part of the process of creation. Gibbs is a figurative painter born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. In 2020, Gibbs graduated with an MFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. His work is in the permanent collection of the Columbus Museum of Art, CC Foundation, X Museum, Baltimore Museum of Art, and the Los Angeles Museum of Art. Gibbs is represented by Marianne Ibrahim Gallery. All right, go ahead, Lex and Jerrell.
Okay. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So yes, thank you all for being here. We appreciate your time. Um, I'm blessed and grateful to be here. Thank you, Lex, for having me be a part of this. I'm excited to dive a little deeper into who you are as an artist, like when you started, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's very important when, as artists, when we're in a position to continue to grow our practice and meet new people along the journey. It's important for us to allow them into who we are on a personal level, so that they know where we're coming from, and it's kind of easier to bridge that gap, if that makes sense. So with that said, my first question for you is, when did you realize that you wanted to be an artist?
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you for joining me. I was talking about your work to Amanda, and she had the idea for us about this exhibition in particular, and it made sense to me because we've been talking, at our crits and stuff. So yeah, I'm really grateful that you decided to participate. All right, question. So when did I start? Well, realize that I wanted to be an artist. Definitely one of those. I've always loved art, kind of like people. So like even during childhood, like my it's like for Mother's Day and like for my mom would be like a little bit more creative than the other kids, right? Like I would put a little bit extra macaroni on there or something like that. But like I always just enjoyed art and like how it made me feel, and I didn't know how to communicate that back then. But through high school, somehow I ended up taking like mad art classes and like as my electives. And it's just the only subject I enjoyed in school at all. So by college, like I knew that I wanted to be an artist. I just was under the impression that I couldn't make any money as an
Mm,
artist. So I concentrated in graphic design initially, because that's where the money was
mm,
apparently. I hated it. Like I despised it. And so I took my first painting class maybe in college, maybe my sophomore year. And the feeling that I had of like a 3-hour class in a studio setting, just kind of off to the side painting, it was just unmatched. And I'm
mm.
like, this is like, I just feel like I shouldn't only feel about this one thing this way if it wasn't meant for me. And then since then I kind of just been finding my way to now. So yeah.
Okay, I understand. That's what's kind of cool is on a personal level, I started this kind of like the same way. I used to draw a lot as a kid, you know what I mean? And just because of the lack of support that I had at the time, I kind of left drawing and all of that like alone for a long time. And then I just so happened to get back into it like after dropping out of college, which was like this resurgence of my childhood. And what's amazing is I feel like a lot of the works that are a part of this show are centered around obviously your son Aiden, but it's also like a reflection. To me, it feels as though it's a reflection of your younger self, your younger being, and you're able to kind of voice these ideas and thoughts and insecurities in a way that's more intellectual at this state. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you're releasing all of these questions and concerns and ideas and thoughts that were there at one point, and then you get to this space where you get to this point in your life when you're older, you're a little more mature. You've had time to sit back and reflect and ponder on things, and you have a different perspective based on those experiences that you went through growing up. That's something that I really found interesting within the works, and something that I was really able to like gravitate with and lock into. Sorry, I went on a quick rant there. But I know like being an artist, being creative, it comes with a lot of time, a lot of investment, and being a parent, like the duality of those two titles and those two modes of being can be a lot. And with that in mind, my second question is, what are some ways in which you maintain balance in life, between life and being a creator?
Um, I think I recently found the balance more so maybe within the last 2 years. And that's just by like honoring whatever season I'm in or whatever place I'm at, like, and just being present. So when it comes to being a parent, I co-parent. So when I have my son, I don't even come to the studio. I'm just a mom that day. And when I
Mm,
have him, I'm an artist the whole day. Like I'm in the studio for hours at a time. So like um fortunately it's easier for me to find that balance through co-parenting rather than like if I had full time. But initially I kind of just ended up merging the two and just like having him in the studio. But when I get my best work done, it's just me late night in the studio kind of thing. But I recognize that I'm like a very like cyclical being, and like there's gonna be times where I want to paint and
mhm.
every day in the studio, and then there's gonna be times where I don't want to get out the bed and I don't want to do anything. And I learned that I had to like embrace both of those things because that creativity and that like drive always comes back around. So it's like literally month to month, I can see the cycle happening. And like I used to be mad. I'm like, I'm just so lazy this day. And like I want to, whatever. But I'm like, no, that's just who you are, and that's just how you are that day. So like give it a couple days or give it, a couple hours even, and then get your butt up and then go back to the studio. So it's definitely a practice of like mindfulness and like just being present in the moment for me.
That's good. That's good. I kind of operate in the same way. I feel like, when you said something about, just really honoring the space that you're in and being able to, just appreciate that time for what it is and acknowledge it, you know what I mean? And just be comfortable with that and know that in due time, in due season, you'll be able to move to a different space. I think, like especially nowadays, I just feel like there's so much pressure to create because of this overconsumption of images online, and just like this overconsumption of information that's always readily available. So you feel like the pressure of like having to produce or having to create something. And if you're not creating, then you're not being productive, which is, I've learned the hard way that that's actually the opposite.
Stop working. I feel like our minds are just always going, right? So even those moments I can't think about like what to create, or like I have like an artist block. I'm
Yeah,
still every day, and like my work is about my experience, so I have to actually be there and experience
yeah,
those. Like if I'm not present, then I'm not able to fully put those emotions into the artwork.
yeah, I understand. And I think it's good, like I said, to really pay attention to that as a creator and acknowledge it, because we do our best work when we're in that space where, we're just mentally in a good space. I mean, who doesn't? Like everybody does whatever they do better when they're in the mental space to do it, right? Um, but I think we have to really pay attention to that downtime too. Like that's really important. And I know for me, I learned that downtime doesn't necessarily have to mean like I'm not immersing myself in experiences, or I'm not being in art, or like being around paintings or going to museums. You know what I mean? Like downtime could still mean going see being a part of that, being a part of that community. It can mean continuing to like go see works, or just challenging yourself to get out of your normal routine. You know what I mean? Um, I think one thing that my professor, John Walter Math, mentioned to me while I was in grad school that I always go back to is, when you get in those like mental ruts as a creator, just like go see other people's work. You know what I mean? Like literally go to museums, go to shows, just like get out of your studio, get out of your house and go see some work, because in some way it just refreshes everything. You know what I mean? It's like a breath of fresh air when you're stepping out of your normal routine.
Agreed.
All right. So speaking of stepping out of routines, going to see other shows, who are some artists that you're currently looking at, whether past or present?
Okay. I know there's some artists who don't like looking at other artists' work and just like I'm focused on my work, but I love going to shows. Like I love supporting my artist friends. I love going to museum shows and seeing artists past and present, like just kind of what what they're doing. Things that really get me going. Like people, my friends know that if I'm whenever I talk about art, I'm just like glowing and just like, different before it comes. I really do like love art and creating art. So certain things that get me going, I would say like relatability and being able to see myself in work. And I think that's usually done through like portrait work and stuff. And I would say your work, for one, is one of the only the few people who like I just see myself in my story in your work. So like there's a piece that you created that they showed. It's like a little boy in front of a birthday cake. And my first series that I did for my solo show, I used reference photos from my childhood and like I combined them with the report cards and stuff like that. And I used all these photos that I found. And there was this one photo that I wanted to do, but I literally didn't do I haven't told you this, but I didn't do the painting because it would have been so similar to this painting right here. Like it would have been the same exact thing, but like my face on that little boy. I like have this exact picture of me, and like I'm sure many people do, but like I like am a person who like if someone else did it before me, I'm not gonna do it, even though I know it would have been different. You know what I'm saying? You did it, you did that, and I don't.
Okay.
The story was captured right there. So definitely your work. Um, Likewise, when it comes to like portrait work that I could see myself in, Jamie Holmes, his work, it's like both of you guys, the setting, the people in the work. I'm like, these people have been in my life. These houses I have been in, these kitchens cooked in, you know what I'm saying? Like these are I can definitely see myself in you guys' work. And then on top of like relatability, I would say like artists who do things that I didn't think of first. Like that really I'm just like, how did they think to do this kind of thing?
Right.
I would say like Karen Davis, um,
Hmm.
the plaster and the
Yeah.
installations and
Amazing.
incredible,
Yeah.
incredible. Um, Installation wise, we'll talk a little bit more about this because I've been getting more into installation, but the Astor Gates, his installation,
Hmm.
certain things that these artists do that like I'm like, this is just you know what I'm saying? Like I wish I thought of that first. And like I love to go see all of you guys' works. Yeah. I mean there's plenty more. I do go to a lot of shows and see
Yeah.
artwork. But those things in particular, I'm just like, this is why I love art.
Right. 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 I understand. I understand. I can relate to what you were talking about in terms of like seeing works that the exact moment, you know the exact feeling, you have the same exact idea, and you're like, damn, they just did it before me. You know what I mean? I'm there like all the time. That's why like I try my best to like get and execute every idea that I have. And it's so difficult, you know what I mean? But the beautiful part about that is we are all in sync. You know what I mean? Like because of the time that we occupy here on earth, because of the communities that we're from, because of um our ethnicity, because of who we have these similarities, you know what I mean, that are all part of our experience that we're like just sharing, you know what I mean? And I think we're in a good space like right now to be able to really highlight and showcase all of these little nuances that were very specific and particular to our culture that we never even paid any attention to because it was just a part of our normal. You know what I mean?
Else would capture it but us. Like I think about that all the time. I'm like, our work is so specific to who we are that
Right.
like it's our duty to do these things, like to capture these things, because nobody who's not a Black millennial
Mm-hmm.
feel this the way we feel it, or even like the newer generations, they wouldn't see, they see that sheet cake. I'm like, why that cake look like that?
Right.
But us, like, this is very specific to our story. And like, um, yeah, like I said, I feel like it was our duty, like if that's our, practice to capture these things, because nobody else can capture it the way we do. Even if it's like, oh, my mom used to do this like one day, but yeah, it's I thoroughly enjoy your work and works that like capture a very specific time. And I think that's what a lot of my previous series was like, for the 90s more so. And then like my series with my son, it's like I'm capturing his life, as it's happening. So
Right. Absolutely. Before we go on to the next question, I want to go back to something you mentioned. Well, an artist that you had brought up, Jay Holmes. And I know for me personally, I love Jay Holmes' works a lot because they're very expressionistic, and that's something that I really enjoy. You know, they're very they're painterly. You know what I mean? Like they're very haptic, they're active. And this is the exact painting that I wanted to talk to, which is beautiful. Talk about Red Bandit Riding Dirty. I've noticed the works in this show are way more expressionistic, way more energetic, in my opinion, way more painterly. And I just wanted to know if there's a reason as to why. Um, but actually, no, I don't want to know that. That's something that I should be able to spend time with the work to kind of question and figure out. But I can say I really do appreciate it. Um, the works in this show really make me feel a part of the space, if that makes sense, because of the way that they're painted, because of the way that they're done. The materiality of the paint makes me really remember a space and time, you know. And like, for example, this piece that we're looking at, Red Bandit Riding Dirty, um, it it brings to my attention, or it makes me think about this little boy on this tricycle or little trike or whatever it is. I remember those from way back in the day. I don't even know what they're called. But the duality between your perspective and his perspective, and then you have the bike painted in this very elegant, very gestural, very painterly manner, and the background is like drawn, you know what I mean? So it's bringing these two, in my opinion, perspectives, and they're kind of like contrasting, and I really appreciate it. I really love it. I just wanted to acknowledge that. I really love this painting, by the way.
that was a really good question that you asked, because I never thought into that. Like I noticed that like my practice is continuously changing.
Mhm.
Though I beat myself up about it sometimes with the variety, I try to embrace it more so. Um, but you know what? Like previous photos, I think were from the past, like in me painting the past and how I maybe even wanted the past to be, versus the work that I did here is like it's very right now. So I think even how I painted it is like right now, is like immediate, like gestural and like just kind of feelings that I'm feeling right now, rather than what me trying to make a clear vision of what the past was, because I didn't remember much of my past. So that was a very interesting question, and I need to dig deeper on why it is that it kind of changed like that, for sure.
It's not a problem. It's just a part of, it's just a part of our process. It's a part of growing as an artist. So it's not a bad thing at all. It's a great thing. So looking at this painting, it makes me think of my next question, which is how has your relationship with your son Aiden impacted your practice?
Um like I don't know who's in here, but like my paintings have changed a bit over time. And when I had my son, I started painting faces. And
Mm,
before I couldn't paint faces. And I tried to do some inner soul digging and like kind of figure out why that was. And like what I was thinking possibly is that before I just kind of painted what I already knew. So like I was one of those, I consider myself, I got my bachelor's in art, but I can kind of consider myself self-taught. And I feel like
mm,
a lot of self-taught artists paint just what we see and what we know. Cartoons, celebrities, like just different things like that. It's like we know we're good at art. We know that we can see something and copy it, and like we do that. And so like I think after I had my son, I'm like I felt the importance of like capturing my own story. And maybe before then I didn't think it was as important to capture until I became a mother. And then everything changed. So like even when I was painting before without the faces, it was more like silhouette figures. And I wanted everybody to be able to relate to this work and feel the work and da da da. But once I painted, like once I had my son, I was like, my story is my story and it's worth capturing, even if no one else can relate to it. However, every like moms everywhere, or like, you know, just different aspects of my life, like they can relate to it. I thought faces would mean that people can't relate to it because it's like my kid's face, like how can you relate to that? And then everybody's like, this looks exactly like my son. Or I'll have like a young boy come and watch and see the show, and then they'll be like, this just reminds me of me. And just like, you know, the relatability of aspect of it was kind of I guess maybe like a huge played a huge role in it. And I think the importance of like documenting and archiving how I feel about raising him in real
mhm.
has been important to me, because it like allows him, one, to see just how loved he is, like in his like gone. Like he is just no gonna be no doubt like to him, like how loved he was from his mom. And like he also enjoys it. Like 2020, I think is when I really started painting him. And it was
Mhm.
like house, it was pandemic time, and like he was my only model. And so like I would paint him in different settings, like in outer space or like in different costumes and stuff. And like I was able to just bring him out of that little space that we had to be confined to for that period of time. And he just thinks it's just like the most normal thing to have like a museum show of him. You know what I mean? Like he just it's very regular to him. He likes seeing other people look at his work. He feels important. He
Yeah.
feels like it really changed everything. I'm gonna cry. So you know, you're that.
Indeed, indeed. I understand wholeheartedly. And just how you feel about that is how other people feel when they see someone that looks like them and works, which is why what we're doing is so important. I mention it all the time, like just representation in itself. You can always go deeper than representation, but I feel like for us specifically, as people of color, like representation is extremely important. It's so important for our generation, the generation before us, the generation that's coming under us, our children to see themselves in these spaces, so that then it's not, so it becomes just the normal, if that makes sense. It's not this extraordinary thing. It's just like we're just living like everybody else. We're here just like everybody else. You know what I mean? Like it's not this extravagant situation. That's what it's about. And I really think a lot of that emotion and a lot of that um, appreciation for seeing these works that show this little boy, your son, Aiden, it really speaks to that. Like people really gravitate to seeing imagery, or um, people gravitate to seeing stories or narratives or having conversations that they can be a part of, you know?
Yeah.
Um, like my daughter, like this is why I do this, you know, in addition to my love for the like painting in particular, but I want my daughter to go to museums and see people that look like us with locks and everything. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want it to be a taboo topic. I want my daughter Reagan to be able to go around and see all shades of Black or brown people in institutions and in spaces and in galleries, so that they know that they're a part of this conversation as well. And it's never a question, you know, because they see themselves there.
Right. And there's still a lot of work to be done to
Oh
get to,
yeah, absolutely.
you know what I mean? But I think, I mean, like, no, we're doing the work right now. That needs to be done. Like, we had a tour with some high schoolers very recently. They just really stole my heart over. And at the end, a young girl came up to me and she was kind of saying how, like, she's into ceramics and she never sees Black artists and, like, Black women artists in particular. And I, you know, me, we're well, both of us, we're so immersed in the art world that we see Black artists everywhere now, right?
Mhm.
But, like,
Right.
they still don't see it unless, like, the teacher's very intentional, or, like, the school system's very intentional about bringing them to Black artists shows and, like, introducing them to, you know, Black artists. Because art history, like, these, you know, Black artists weren't in my art history class. Like, I
Right.
didn't
Right.
know, I didn't even know it was a thing until I was a part of it. So I feel like there's just so much work to be done. I am so, like, sometimes, well, for my residency, we have to, like, gallery sit, like, once a month. And, like, I'll see, since the show opened, like, usually moms bringing in their little boys and they specifically are looking for my exhibition, and they'll come upstairs and I could see, like, all the security, like, the little kid just getting so excited. And I'm telling you, like, it's just, like, my heart just explode, you know. So
Uh,
yeah, yeah, we doing the work.
Indeed, indeed. That's what's up. I'm glad to hear that. All right, so next question, and it's all centered again still around the work that's in your show. Um, but I did notice you started to really dive into showing other ways of creating other than just painting in the show. And with that in mind, I wanted to know what in particular led you to exploring new mediums in reference to works such as Lil Man and Rosedale Playground.
Yeah, okay. So I, like I said, well, when I really fell in love with art, it was painting. Like, the way it made me feel, I felt like it was the only thing that I could do for hours, and, like, I won't be focusing on everything else because my mind just runs a million miles per hour. So, like, painting, I fell in love with. And then for my last series, when I started using the report cards and certificates, I really wanted to start, I guess, telling my own story, but using new materials and, like, materials that already have life to them in the pieces, and, like, archiving and documenting my life and my story, right? Because when I'm long gone, I want to be able to, I'm writing my story. I don't want anyone else to write it, right? I want to be very, very intentional about that. So once I ran out of report cards, because, like, they were, you know, I did so many pieces with the report cards. I'm like, all right, what else do I do? Because I really enjoy this aspect of art. And so that's when, like, for these new pieces, even like the paintings that I did, each piece has something of Aiden's in it, whether a mask, a cape, or whatever. These are things that the costumes he's grown out of, and, like, it's lived a life, and I'm able to now release it and let it go into the work, and um, it gets to live a new life.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing that, but then I'm like, what happens when I start taking away the faces? You know what I mean? What happens when I start only just using other materials? And I have, like, fell in love with sculpture and installation work, because I feel like there's something that I'm doing in those that I haven't been able to fully do in my paintings. And it's like a level of creativity and, like, ingenuity that I've been able to put into the installations and sculptures that I'm working towards more so in my paintings. And a lot of the time when I use his old pants or I use his old like shoes and things like that, for instance, let's like this Rosedale Playground installation, I like that other people can kind of see themselves in the work more so because there's no face in it, right? So they can, I think, relate on a different level. And it also leaves a bit of a like not curiosity, but like of a space that allows the viewer to um, put their own meaning to it and like what they
Right.
see versus I think my painting sometimes it's like this is what it is, this is like a moment, this is
Mhm.
what, but I enjoy the installations on a level that it allows like the viewer to put their own spin on it and like have their own idea of what I was thinking while creating it.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. I think that's the beauty of one abstract work. I think that's the beauty in sculpture and installation works as well. Just having that dialogue with the viewer. We all have our similarities as well as we all have our differences, and I think um, moments like these, like the installation works in your show, give the viewer an opportunity to kind of bring themselves into the space beyond like just seeing. You know what I mean? Beyond representation, you you're able to enter the work with a different purpose, if that makes sense. Like because you're not just centered and focused on one specific thing. You're thinking about a culmination of like multiple ideas coming into one, and then you also have to take into account what the artist did specifically, what didn't the artist do specifically. So it's this back and forth dialogue that you are able to have as a viewer when you meet these type of works, which I really appreciate.
There are a lot. It's like it's so it refreshed kind of art for me because like
Mhm.
painting is like all right, I get it. Like I can see something and I can recreate it, right? I can and I guess that's why I really enjoy your work too, is because it's like you don't just copy a painting, you put the feelings into that. You paint different objects as the object, you know what I mean? Like you have that. But for installations, for me, it's like what really is like exciting for me at this point is like I have an idea and I have to source the materials, or I have materials and I have to kind of source the idea. And it's like, how do I do that? Like going to thrift stores, going in my son's closet, like that really is like a thrill for me at this point, even like to be able to, it's like a challenge. It's like, how do I get this message across without saying too much,
Right.
um, and like what materials can I use to best get it across? And that is what the sculptures and installations have been for me.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Um, so my last question before I guess we get to like some Q&A. Um, do you consider your paintings and mixed media installation work separate practices, or are they the same? This is a question that is around a lot right now. You know what I mean? Like this is a very um not hot topic, but in group settings with artists, like this is something that we always questioning. You know what I mean? So I'm curious to see what you think and how you look at and approach your work.
You know, I would say no. It's definitely not separate practices because it comes from the same place. Like my practice is very much my perspective, my specific perspective as a Black female, millennial mother, and everything that I am, right? So I want to, I mean, I do go about each of the weather painting or sculpture the same way, as in like I want to show my perspective. They usually both have something to do with like education or just like children at this point. But obviously they're two whole different mediums, right? So it's like I do both of them are like me documenting things, whether past or present.
Mhm.
But I feel like maybe the installations are more so like allows a wider audience to relate to it. Um,
Hmm.
I imagine that the paintings and the installation works are going to somehow merge someday. Though I haven't picked up a paintbrush in like weeks. Like I've been working on sculptures lately, which is like crazy to me because like I'm a painter. So but like I said before, there's something about those sculptures and installations that I
Hmm.
haven't been able to get that whatever into my paintings yet.
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's like you can access something else.
it's something, right?
Yeah,
It's something,
yeah.
and I'm like trying to figure out how to do that. And right now, I'm definitely going in a certain path, but I imagine the two merging a lot more at somewhere down the line because at the end of the day, like you said, representation matters, and like me painting myself and me painting my son and me painting my story is very important to me. And I will continue to do that. But like I said, seasons, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand totally. Trust me. I salute you because what you're doing is not easy. Being able to like, obviously, it's from one person. It's from your perspective. These are your works, but the thought process that goes into creating different style of works are not easy. You know, it's not easy to shift in between the two.
That's my mind. That's the crazy.
I've been trying to do it for so long. This is like it's excruciating.
I admire someone being able to like lock in the way you do though, because
Mm,
like it's literally like my mind one day wants to paint and the next day wants to do something else. Like
yeah.
this is important to me today. This is important to me tomorrow. And it's like I'm here and here and here. And like I'm trying to learn to embrace it. But I know that sometimes I need to like, okay, chill, reel it in. But yeah, I it's just that's just the way my mind really works. And there's certain things that I can't get across in
Hmm.
that I can get across in sculptures and installations. So
Oh yeah,
whatever
absolutely.
medium can best get that idea across is what I want to go with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lynette Yedon she said something similar to that. Like she 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 paints what she can't write, and she writes what she can't paint. Like, well said. You know, like I feel that wholeheartedly. I'm not a writer, but I
I
do things that I can't do with painting that I do whatever, if that makes sense.
right.
Von Span is another artist that I think of as well that operates in that same vein, that duality, that the idea of like not locking into one specific style of creating, but allowing the ideas that he have for a specific space to grow in that space. And then, you know, like figurative and abstract work, like
Yeah.
he takes the time to not into I mean, I guess like separate the two. You know what I mean? Like he has ideas that he can translate in abstract that he may not be able to translate with figurative work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I hope it's more like widely accepted in the art world that artists sometimes just work like that. You know what I mean? Like it's sometimes I feel like it's not as accepted because it's like, right,
Mhm.
you all over the place, but like literally sometimes you can't get those same messages across and you got to choose a new medium, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand that. And you got to continue to challenge yourself. Like we're artists. If we were focused on um, the limitations and um, the constraints in the outside world, we wouldn't be artists. You feel me? So just continue to tap into that.
And my art friends, y'all amazing to me. Like y'all keep me going because like I'm always like, reel it in, Lex. And y'all like, no, you're doing what you're supposed to do. I'm like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you, Lex. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, Amanda.
Hi. All right, we've got a couple of questions here in the Q&A. I think I'll go ahead and start with you, Alana. Hi, Lex. Are there any, and by the way, she loves this. Are there any books, movies, or media that have been transformative in your practice? And what theories or thought processes are you excited to continue exploring?
Hey, okay, so the last book I read, Homegoing, which I just finished, it was about two sisters from Ghana who one actually, it's a novel, and one of them um ended up being a slave, and one of them was more so like married as slaver, and they lived like very two different lives, and their stories from generation to generation were told in the book. And obviously the stories kind of changed over time and things. And so there was something very specific in this book. I joined a book club to help me read more and like hold me accountable, because I love reading, I love learning, but I won't do it because I'll paint or whatever. But anyway, there was this very specific thing, and there was a in the story that said there was a man with a scar on his face. He was a professor. He asked the kids basically like, they all heard about his scar because it's a huge scar. Like, what did you guys hear about this, my scar? And they all told the stories that they knew about, well, they heard about the scar. And then he asked whose story is true. And they were like, one person finally said, we don't know whose story is true because we weren't there. And he was like, exactly, that's how history works. Like, no one really knows the truth because we weren't there, but like these stories are being passed on over time, and that's just kind of how it works. Like, this is the story that we know now, and you have to tell your own story so it can kind of continue to pass down. And like that part of that book in particular has really started to change, well, started to impact my practice in a way, because I was telling my story for a long time, but like I think it's starting to come out in my work that I want to tell stories before me as well, because that impacts my story. And so yeah, that's a book. What was the second question?
Let's see, books, movies, or media, and what theories or thought processes are you excited to continue exploring?
Okay. So the reason that I use education so much in my work is because like the way my mom enforced it in childhood. Like, it was like you got to go to school, get good grades, and that's how you get out of here kind of thing. So she super enforced it, and like in my sisters and I my sister in my lives. And I want to continue to, especially because obviously my son goes to school, continue to explore the, I guess, benefits and the negative aspects of school and public school systems in particular, and how it has affected particularly Black students, whether good and bad, over time. And that is something that I'm kind of focusing on right now.
This feeds perfectly into the next question from Brandon. Can you tell us what motivated you to make the school supplies piece where you made an AK-47 out of pencils?
Okay, so that's where I'm going right now with my work, kind of in that direction with the sculptures. And I guess it does speak directly into that, because education is a huge part of my practice. And like I was saying, like the benefits and the negative aspects of education right now, and what kids have to go through. So the solo exhibition that I have of Let Them Kids Be Kids was centered around that idea, or the just idea of adultification bias, which, if you don't know what that is, it's essentially Black children are seen as older and more mature than their white counterparts. And I really dove into what Black children have to go through that makes them age or mature faster than they need to. And a huge aspect of that, or not just Black children, but children in general, has been school. I think death and school shootings more recently. And so that's kind of why I started to go into the sculptures about that. And like, for instance, the other piece that I made that was pretty similar with the other school supplies that I used that were rulers, it was more so about like discipline and just like different things that drive children to have to age like before they need to, you know what I mean? So that's where that's coming in.
Thank you for answering that one. And then I have another question from Olivia, a fellow resident. Hi, Lex. Do you ever find yourself being precious about the materials that you use that are inherently quite personal, like report cards or costumes, or maybe even have specific meaning formed organically over time and couldn't be recreated? I'm curious if that factors into your process at all.
All of these things are really special to me, especially like the Spider-Man costumes that we see on that piece. But I'm like a person who feels like once this thing can no longer serve me, I gotta let it go. So he literally cannot fit those costumes anymore. So what I would usually do is I send them to the Salvation Army or just, donate them somewhere. And but I thought maybe I should repurpose this and give it a new life. And that's where a lot of the work, well, the me adding the other elements into the work comes from. So even like people were like, when I used the report cards, how are you doing this? Like, why are you doing this? Why aren't you photocopying it and then using that? And I'm just like, these things have been sitting in my mom's basement for for literally 20 years, like in a bin. You know what I mean? They're serving no purpose down there, and like something about using the actual materials that have been touched and used and whatever makes it a little bit more special for me. So I am okay with letting go of these objects. There's certain things that I'm like, no, I gotta keep it for myself. Gotta keep it for myself. But a lot of things I'm okay with letting go.
Okay, that was the last question that I have from the Q&A. I guess one question that I had for you both is, and maybe we kind of in a roundabout way talked about this, but you both have a relationship with personal archives and specifically photographs. So I wondered if you could talk about the way that you've used those photographs in your work.
You first. Do you want to go?
Oh no, ladies first, please.
Okay. That's a good question. So I guess we can talk about this series specifically. I use photos, I guess, loosely. So like, for instance, the piece that we're looking at, it was from 3 different photos. Sometimes I use, like when I paint the past, it's more so like those moments were captured and I look at the past and I try to paint it as it is. But for like when I have an idea and I have something in the present moment that I feel, I stage the work. I mean, stage the photographs a little bit more. So like for this piece, like I'm like, he wears Spider-Man outfits all the time. So I'm like, all right, pose so I can capture you in this moment, you know what I mean? So like that's a little bit more stage, but these are things that he does all the time. I'm just like, can you sit still for 1 second so I can actually like capture it? I think I guess, moving away from using photographs, especially with like sculptures and installations. But yeah, like I think I use photographs really loosely more and more. Like I'm moving away from it. Like I like to have the vibe and the feel of the photograph, like even if it's from the past, but something about like putting that away at some point and just painting on the canvas without it brings more life to it, I guess, for me. Yeah.
I think I kind of use photos in the same way, in a very similar way. Typically when I'm thinking about using photographs, I'm never like looking through a photo album and saying, oh, I'm going to use this image today. You know what I mean? I'm gonna use this photograph today. It's more so for me, I look through a series of photo albums on it like all the time, and I take pictures in my phone all the time. And I do that so that I can always have in the back of my mind like an image, of the idea, a thought. Because when I get a thought, I'm like, okay, I know the perfect picture that will help introduce the viewers into this thought or idea that I have. Like the photograph is specifically for me staging the figure. And then the idea that I have is the creation in the background, the foreground being created to kind of house the figure, if that makes sense. Because the figure for me isn't just about um, portraiture. It's like, it's about painting, and it's about composition. It's about wholeness of a work. So when I'm thinking figure, when I'm thinking photograph, I'm thinking about how can this specific photo reinforce this idea that I have, that I'm attempting to create and relate to the viewer. And when I'm using my figures, I place them in different spaces to kind of fulfill the compositional need, as opposed to it like only being about the figure. So yeah, I kind of, I guess I think in like a, I'm kind of like collaging ideas, if that makes sense. But I'm also like thinking in an abstract way. You know, I'm thinking about line. I'm thinking about I'm thinking about functionality between like colors and shapes. I'm thinking about relationships, brushstroke. I'm thinking about all of those different painterly ideas or functions of painting that go into like creating one work.
It's interesting that you use the word collage, because I know you both work in collage in a sort of interesting, different way. Last question. This is from Trey Mason, and I think that's Charles, whose birthday it is today, right? I'm curious. Happy birthday. I'm curious if you both would ever collaborate with one another on a series of works speaking directly to the 3 stages of life.
3 stages of life.
Life
I mean,
kind, it says.
I feel like I got a lot more time to get to the 3rd stage. You feel me? I don't know. I think it would be cool too. I think we have a lot in common that we could really talk about. You know what I mean? Like in terms of just like parenting, in terms of what we do as artists. You know what I mean? Like upbringing. You know, a lot of similarities there. I think our way of thinking is kind of from the same source as well, if that makes sense. So I would definitely be open to it.
Yeah, very, very similar experiences, but we obviously have different experiences too. You know what I mean? So I think you see both of our perspectives so kind of clearly in the work, but they're so similar. But it's like, I think even you can more so look at your work and say a man painted this, you know what I mean? And me is more like a woman painted this. Um, and I don't know what it is about it. It's not the colors, it's not the way we paint. It's just like we can tell that you painted that and I painted what I painted. So like, yeah, of course it would be an honor. And yeah, I look forward to kind of just where both of our works are gonna continue to go from here.
This is an interesting last question, and we are actually at time. So we're exactly at 7:00. So this comes from Gilbert Trent. Hi, Gilbert. He says, I love both of your work. I'm a painter as well as a former resident there. That's very cool. So they say, I used paper doll motifs to address issues related to race, sex, and gender, and also reincarnation. Is there a spiritual connection in your works?
I would say yes, because of how I'm feeling while I create the work. I don't think it's like a intentional thing, but like I I had mentioned that like I really like to be present when I'm doing something. So specifically when I'm creating, it's more like it's like a meditation, a form of meditation for me, even because like I'm thinking about this thing, I'm thinking about how I felt when I experienced this thing. I'm thinking about how I feel about it at that moment. I'm feeling the materials in my hand. I'm like very present and in the moment. And I think that helps me. And I think that comes out in the work as well. And I think my best ideas come from when I am silent and silent and in my brain. I would even say, like, in my head about things. So like my best ideas come out while I'm not working. You know what I mean? It's when I am specifically trying to quiet my mind, whether it be via meditation or, you know, whatever have you. So in that way, yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I would have to say, one, that's a great question. I don't even know if I've actually thought about that, to be completely transparent. When I think of spirit, when I think of like a spiritual act, I think of something that's done kind of like not in isolation, but like within, you know what I mean? Like within the person, within the being, within the mind, and something that obviously like you can't see. So I'm thinking, I always think of like from an insular perspective, if that makes sense. So yes, I thinking in that space, I would say yeah, because one, I work in isolation, because I can't not work in isolation. Like if I'm around people, the type of person that I am in my personality, I can't really focus on working when I have a group of people or other people in my space, because I'm like operating within and outside, if that makes sense. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't happen. So I have to be kind of, I guess, spiritual in that sense, and kind of within myself, within my space, within my being, in order to really access these ideas, and really like tap in to where as though I'm not being prescriptive. I'm not prescribing something to the canvas. I'm actually just allowing the process to kind of happen, if that makes sense.
Okay. Gilbert says thank you and good night to all. And I think that that's actually like a really nice note for us to end on. So again, thank you to everybody who's participated in this conversation, and especially to you, Lex and Jerrell, for your generosity. I think if there's any spiritual principle that is guiding everything you've done for us tonight and the work city. So thank you both for that. The show will be open until, as I mentioned earlier, the show being Lex's exhibition will be open until January 22nd. We're open Wednesday through Sunday from 12 to 5. And maybe if you're lucky, you'll get to meet Lex at the gallery itself. So thank you, everyone. And thank you both. Have a wonderful evening.